All right, everyone. Last class, we were discussing the basics of raster graphics. Oops. And we discussed it in terms of using Adobe Photoshop and also Photopea. So I'm going to go through just kind of stuff that applies to specifics to raster editing programs in general, and then I'll break down into more specifics about Photoshop versus Photopea. So remember that a raster graphic is an image built out of pixels. Okay. I'm just going to open up an image into Photopea, but I could, I could do the same thing in Photoshop or other raster editing programs. So if I grab a photo like this football here, if you were to zoom in, you would see that this graphic is built out of individual little squares, right? And that is kind of how a raster graphic works. I like to think of it kind of like Legos, you know? If you've ever used Legos, there's like those 1-bit Legos. I don't mean it's probably gonna think I mean like the maybe single Lego piece. Maybe that's the term I'm looking for. Yeah. Like you have these, right? And then like you can stack them all, a bunch of them up and make something a little bit more complex in terms of colors. That's kind of essentially what this is, except, it is a digital version of that. So for instance, I can have one single pixel that is purple. I can have one single pixel that is green. Notice how they're all squares. I can have them be yellow. I can have them be red. Okay. Um, so I have, all these pixels here. And the idea is like, okay, if I got a bunch of these together, I'm just going to use red. So I have five up, four across, five down, and then two across. Hey, I get the letter A. You know what I mean? Or if I do a little stair steppy, this is not great, but you can see how I could like make something that kind of looks like a circle or something like that, right? And just imagine you get hundreds of thousands of these, each with their own possibility of some sort of color, all these variations of color. So, like if I have brown, I can have light brown and dark brown and medium brown and all these kind of variations. I could build something, complex. So, all raster graphics work with pixels. A program that works with raster images is a raster editing program. There are literally probably tens, if not hundreds, of raster editing programs. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the more bigger ones that you've probably used or heard of. You've probably heard of Adobe Photoshop, I'm sure. That is a raster editing program. You may have heard of Clip Studio Pro. That's another one that is fairly popular. There's something called Affinity Designer, which is another sort of pro version. Let's see. Oh, did they get bought out? Oh man. Oops, I didn't know that. Affinity Designer got bought out by Canva. Okay, so now they're part of Canva. Um, a lot happens in a year. Last time I heard about this, which was a year ago, I hadn't heard about this particular software, but someone had told me about it, and then I guess it got bought out by another company. So I guess it's just Affinity. Affinity Photo Editing, I guess is the official name. But that would also be a raster editing program. It used to cost money. Now I guess it's free. I don't remember how much it used to cost. There's Photopea, which we'll be using, and these are some of the bigger ones. There's literally hundreds of smaller versions of this. There's something called GIMP, which is a very popular open source photo editor. And there's maybe Adobe Lightroom is another one you may have heard of if you're kind of more on the photography side of things. And so all of these are what I would call and what other graphic designers would call raster editing programs. They deal with raster images. aka an image built out of pixels with with possibility of having many, many colors. Okay. Programs that are raster editing save into a raster image format. Examples of a raster image format is any image that is saved using pixels. So this would include things like the Photoshop document, which is the .psd. You may have heard of this. This is the native format of Adobe Photoshop. We can also use it in Photopea, which is what we're using in this course as an alternative. JPEG is another very popular one you may have heard of. GIF, PNG, WebP is very popular for websites and things like that. The same with something called AVIF, which is a newer web format. There's actually many more than this. These are just kind of the more common ones you're going to probably see around when you work with, raster images and all that kind of stuff. But any of these images, this happens to be a JPEG file, but I could find a similar PNG file and open it up into Photoshop and in Photopea, and you would see that it is built out of pixels. In fact, why don't we just do that right now? Let's get a GIF of a puppy. I think this is trying to do like an animated GIF. I don't really want an animated GIF. I just want. And it's gonna do victim of my own. All right. This is okay. Well, whatever. Let's download this file, which is a GIF file. And I'm going to open up into Photopea, but I could do the same thing in Photoshop, and you can see that this particular graphic is built out of pixels. Okay. Just like the JPEG here, just like other formats. Okay. All right. So we talked about that. We also talked about the idea of when you set up a document, you are probably going to want to set up measurement, or you should set up like dimensions. We typically measure these dimensions. I recommend measuring in pixels. Why pixels? Because pixels are used for digital playback, which is how we measure things for a computer screen or a television screen or a cell phone, that kind of thing. So it's in my opinion, that's a better way of since we're going to be dealing with pixels when we get to video and we get to motion design and After Effects and all that. It's just a good idea, in my opinion, to keep use pixels as your measurement. We also talked about the idea of resolution, which is the concept of pixels per inch. This is sometimes referred to as DPI or PPI or dots per inch or pixels per inch. They all basically mean the same thing, which is how many pixels are there in a physical inch? So if you were to take a ruler like this one and measure on your computer screen or your cell phone screen exactly 1 inch, and then open up an image, a digital raster image, and count how many pixels there were in a physical inch, not a virtual one, how many would there be? And we talked about the idea that you need a minimum resolution. This means this is the minimum number you would need for your image to look good. And for screen devices, we said that would be a resolution of about 72 pixels per inch or a DPI of 72. Okay. So if I go, excuse me, if I want to see either of those things, I can usually view this in my program by going under image size, and this would show me my width and my resolution. If the graphic design program you're dealing with has something called color space, which is the ability to save the colors in different formats, we would want to use the RGB or the red, green, and blue format. Okay. Those are kind of ideas that go across all raster programs. It doesn't matter, which one of these I'm talking about here. any of these that I'm talking about here could fall under the idea of dimensions and resolution and things like that. In the next video, we'll split up and talk specifically about whether we're talking about Photoshop or Photopea. And, we'll go over what I talked about last class, and we'll also talk about new stuff today. We're going to talk about how to combine elements of different raster graphics together. So last class was a little bit boring, right? It was like, resizing images and cropping and no, it's not really as much fun, right? We want to take like our friend's head from a photo and put it on the body of a dog or something like that, right? That's what today is going to be about. How can we select and copy and paste and combine different raster graphics together? Okay.